So this last Sunday, we looked at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, and there was so much content that we actually had to cut out about 10 minutes of the message. And so what you're about to watch is that part that was cut out on drawing attention versus getting attention. So hope you enjoy it. So let me read 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things, and keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. Okay, as I already said, please bear with me. I'm not going to get into all the nuances of these verses right now. I promise we will next week. That's my little tag for you to have to be with us again next week, which probably isn't very hard because you've got nowhere you can go. And so, but I want to look at this from the perspective of attention, because Paul talks about how that there were, you can cover your head, you cannot cover your head, this kind of an issue, head coverings, right? What does this have to do with getting attention or drawing attention? Let me just give a quick little bit of background. In the Roman and in the Greek world, also true in the Jewish tradition, women would, in public, especially in public, they would wear a head covering. And that was just a form of modesty. It was a way of, it was culture. You would wear a head covering. Now, there were those who would not wear head coverings, but the reason that you didn't wear a head covering was because you were looking for attention. Not just any kind of attention. Quite often it was the kind of attention that you shouldn't be getting from men. And there were temples all around these cities, these Roman and Greek cities, where the women priestesses would not have their heads covered. And the whole point was to get men to give them attention. So this is the context of what Paul's writing about here in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And for the men, Paul says, hey, don't cover your head. Why? Why was it such a big deal? Why was it dishonoring? Well, I think there's, again, a couple reasons. Men didn't cover their heads like that. So it was kind of like a strange thing that they would come into church. The idea is this. There were some men that would come into church, Christians, and they would cover their heads and then read the scriptures or share something. And so one, it was just not common. And then two, it was almost like they were promoting this kind of mysterious idea of who they were. Almost this kind of super spiritualism that I'm more. I'm covering myself. I'm in a holy place. All this kind of, their voices probably changed. They spoke in old King James, they took on a different persona. And Paul says, listen, when you're in the church, don't change who you are in that way. Don't take on this kind of super spiritual persona. Be you. Now, I should say this to every single one of us. Jesus loves us just the way we are, right? But he loves us so much, he's not leaving us the way we are. So there is a redeemed us that God is working on every single day. But what Paul is worried about was that people were putting on a persona in church that nobody else could ever live up to. I've been encouraged, I don't even know if that's the right word, but I've had people say that to me. You shouldn't share your own personal life too much. You shouldn't share your own weaknesses too much. You shouldn't let people in like that. And I'm just reading the New Testament and I see Jesus and I see his disciples. I see honest, humble, sincere. When they were wrong, they weren't afraid to have that be acknowledged. I want to live that way. I want that to be my Christian life. I don't want to give the impression that I'm some super spiritual person. I have some closer access to God than anybody else does. I'm struggling as much as everybody else. I need Jesus as much as every single one. And I know you all know this to be true. Paul is kind of removing that idea of super spiritualism as it relates to our being in the church. Okay, so let's read the next few verses beginning in verse 5 of 1 Corinthians 11. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. For that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. Okay, so I kind of already mentioned the idea, and that was that like in public, women were covered. And then Paul says something was happening in Corinth where they would come into the church, they would have a position of leadership, a role, and they were not covering their heads. They were breaking kind of not just culture, but this idea of like, yeah, just a cultural norm. They stopped wearing these head coverings. And Paul says, hold on, what was the norm? Let's not break that in trying to get attention to ourselves in a way that is unhealthy and is going to not bring glory to the Lord. And that really is going to become the big issue here is, am I willing to live in such a way where my life brings glory to the Lord? Or, as what was happening with the Corinthians, some of them were saying, I want the attention. It wasn't just getting attention, it was drawing attention to themselves. The issue for you and me, 2020, is not head coverings, obviously. But there's a principle here that I believe is still relevant in this context, and it's this. I don't have to draw attention to myself for God to be glorified. And I want to just take a couple minutes and talk about what I think that can look like. I think it's easy when we talk about drawing attention. There's a way to draw attention. I can go big, right? I want to be the best. I want to show you that I'm the best. I'm the strongest. I'm the, whatever. I know these people, and we have an idea of what that can look like. There's another way that we can draw attention to ourselves that I think among many Christians, we might not see it that way, but it certainly can be. It's the idea of going small in a way. Well, let me rephrase it. Here's the better way I could say this. It's by showing how bad I am in the idea that I'm going to draw attention to the Lord, but I'm really still drawing attention to myself, right? Oh, you did such a good job. Oh no, I'm the worst. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. These are still words that might sound spiritual, right? In Christian terms, we love to hear somebody say that they're no good. But that could be just as drawing attention as when I talk about how great I am. You see, I could say to you right now, I'm the best. I'm drawing attention to myself. But I can also say to you, I am the worst. I am such a terrible, lousy, horrible person. And that's going to get me attention as well, because now you're going to try to reach out to me and be like, no, you're not the worst. You're a great guy. You're doing so good. Yeah, I could play a song, and afterwards I could say, man, I just did a terrible job at that. That was terrible. And now I'm drawing attention to myself. I'm seeking after attention. Friends, the idea is this. Somebody could be great at something. They don't have to play it bad or do something bad in order to be on my level. I'll go back to Michael Jordan. Wouldn't it be weird if he just missed shots to make me feel good? No, he just was great. I have a great friend he's one of the best piano players I've ever seen in my life. He could play the piano like nobody I've ever met. When he finishes playing something beautiful, he certainly has gotten my attention. But if he were to just try to play bad, he would be drawing attention to himself. Do you understand the difference? We want to be who we are. We don't need to try to act humble or falsely show how low we are in a weird way that draws attention to ourselves when our whole goal was to give attention to Jesus. Instead, you've got to be you. In the good and in the bad, you just got to be you. We might get attention. John the Baptist got attention. Peter, the apostle, in the book of Acts, he got attention when he preached the gospel. But we don't want to siphon attention away from the Lord. And we can do that in all the different ways that I've described. We just want to be careful that we honor the Lord by being who we are.